Hello and welcome to PerchPeek Pods, the only place to get long-form interviews with some of the world's leading global mobility experts. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Bushra Siddiqui, Global Mobility Manager at John Swire and Sons, JSSHK, a crazy company with fingers in many pies, which I'm looking forward to digging into later. We've got so much to talk about today. But Bushra, before we jump into that, introduce yourself to the community and tell us a little bit about how you fell into the wonderful world of global mobility.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. My journey into mobility is probably similar to most people that are in this field. I moved to Hong Kong back in 2008 with my husband, who moved over on a traditional assignment. Wow. As most people do, for a Japanese bank. We came here and we were here for 2 years. During that time, I had just completed my law and my law conversion degree in UK. So when I came here with 2 kids under 2, my option was either to go back to studying and do a conversion in law in Hong Kong or get a job. Having that absolute privilege of having help in Hong Kong, I decided to go into the working field. Tried my hand out in a few things in financial planning, etc., and then had the privilege of working with the Refugee Advice Center for a good 9 months.
Wow.
Where I was working as a caseworker and a translator. And then I had a friend who was at the time in Crown and was going on maternity and asked me if I would be interested in going in and covering her on the schooling space, not knowing what global mobility was or anything about it. I thought, why not?
Why not? Let's do it.
Let's go. I went into Crown for an interview, and the lady in charge at that time very quickly decided that I was not going to go into schooling and instead put me in charge of the DSB function within Crown.
Wow.
That was it. And after the 2-year assignment for my husband ended, we were both in love with Hong Kong so much that we decided we were not going to move back with the company. So he quit his job and applied for a different job on a local contract in Hong Kong. And
wow.
60
what a
years
story.
down the line.
What a story. Yes.
We are still here. Yeah. It's home.
Amazing. So 15 plus years in Hong Kong, 15 plus years of mobility. Wow, we've got a lot to discuss. Tell me about when you heard about, you're sort of in that phase, which I think people who work in mobility are very familiar with. You moved with your partner. You're there thinking, what do I do? My whole career is not feasible. My qualifications not, not valid here. People have that the whole time. If you don't mind me asking, how was that time?
It was difficult. No doubt about it. I had my 2 young kids with me. So studying was not an option, but that did, exactly to your point, mean me giving up on something that obviously I'd spent a lot of time and energy doing. Yeah. Law for me was a passion project, a passion degree, which is why I did it. And I was very focused on human rights. So I was giving up a big part of myself. But at the same time, I also realized the adventure of being in Hong Kong. As someone, who's lived in Europe their entire life, grown up in Denmark, which is a tiny country, then moved to UK, which is a lot bigger and a lot more diverse, then coming completely out in Asia to a country that I barely heard about.
Yeah.
Took it in my stride. There was some, reminiscing and some emotional adjustment required.
Yeah.
I think having the opportunity to sort of still live in that human rights and legal space with the refugees helped the transition a bit. And then coming into, this new career, which I very quickly realized was just, boundless. I started in a small fraction of it, but understanding the industry and how big it was and the changes I've had in my career within the industry in the last many years, it kind of,
everything fell into place.
Yeah, exactly.
So you crushed that well, and that actually, tell me about that then. So you relocated as a traditional sort of expat family at the time, but it sounds like, reading between the lines, you still weren't particularly aware of global mobility, even post to move yourself, which I always think is an interesting perspective. What was your sort of experience when you actually were relocated in the industry?
To be honest, I mean, I think my experience and my husband's experience was very much as a very glorified packing service. So we came, we had all the boxes there, and I mean, they did a great job. The boxes were here, and there was a leaflet left on top, basically saying, if you want someone to explain to you how to live in Hong Kong, you can contact us. So it was also a very passive sales model. Obviously, I don't have the details on what their relocation package was or what the company sold, but I didn't know to ask those questions back then. But there were literally a leaflet left there, which at that point, you just think, I don't really want to be walking the streets of Hong Kong with a stranger telling me things.
Yeah.
It was just like, it felt
seems weird.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny that you went on to lead DSP at Crown. So
well,
exactly. Sort of thinking, probably not how I would go about introducing local services.
Well, exactly. And I mean, moving it to young kids and trying to find them kindergartens, it probably, if I had been more aware of it, would have been something I would have utilized a lot more. Because we did end up doing everything on our own, doing our own research and getting people's advice and then figuring it all out. So yeah, very different. I'm not sure if at that time it was just because it wasn't. No, I mean, it was in 2008. It would still have been at the height of mobility. So I'm not sure why the company had that approach. But
yeah, but I think I think it is interesting how different companies, even within the same industry, people often think, everyone in finance is going to have these incredible packages. Everyone in, it's often, there's so much variety within industries. It's really crazy, right? It's really interesting how those get set up. And I think so interesting that even when you've been through a traditional expat move, your sort of awareness is like pretty low when someone just says, hey, you don't know what DSP is or really any of the local services, and it's so easy to get lost in the weeds whenever you're in the industry. So really interesting insights. So I'm just going to read off your roll call of roles. So you went Crown, then you had time at Cartus, you had time at PGRS, you've had time at Server as well. Some of the biggest RMCs or relocation companies out there, all within the all based out of Hong Kong. So I'm super excited to dig into the APAC market specifically with you.
Yeah.
You obviously, they're all very international companies. Where do you feel companies often struggle with APAC from your perspective, working across those different companies?
I think the biggest challenge you probably have is one where the client base of where the client's headquartered and them understanding the market. There's one aspect that's the service delivery that RMCs would provide, but the other thing are the local and cultural restrictions, the timelines that kind of frame the bigger picture. So designing a process of service delivery is the easy part. Implementing it is going to look very different across locations in APAC. I think APAC, uniquely compared to Europe or the Americas, is, a region with so much diversity that you cannot lift and shift any process from one location to the other. The only two countries that may come close is Singapore and Hong Kong, but even within that, there's differences.
Yeah.
But you go to some of the emerging markets or some of the countries with more restrictions like India and China, you have to do everything backwards and you have to do everything with multiple processes at the same time. And predicting anything or giving any clear timelines for anything is near impossible.
Yes.
So understanding that flexibility is not to do with processes, but with local regulations and local culture, and putting that through to clients that are not necessarily based in the region or doesn't have a big presence in the region can be a challenge.
Yeah. And let's dig in there. I said we go super tactical. People listening to this often going to be global mobility leaders, or was leaders. They're thinking, okay, what can we do about that? So what are some of the processes that you see most often breaking down? Are we speaking immigration timelines, shipping timelines, home finding timelines? What processes are you seeing slip, and like what do you see as like effective remedies to sort of improve the situation or improve the client understanding?
I mean, so the immigration one's obviously a key one, right? That's sort of kind of the spine of any assignment. And it is usually the one that controls the timelines the most. So, and that is also one of the biggest challenges in the region with the recent, not just recent, even pre-COVID, countries have changed a lot in terms of their immigration requirements, even places like Hong Kong and Singapore, whether they're for the better or they made it more strict, it just has downstream effects, which means you need to know what's required locally. And a lot of these changes have meant that the companies locally have to do their due diligence on their end before we can do any kind of service delivery on our end. So I think it's important for any company to understand these processes and internal processes required from their side to be prepared. So if you do want to bring, a big group of IT experts on mid-level to Singapore, you need to show the government you've done your bit to find that talent there, you've posted the jobs that's long, etc. Have those parts done and that they meet the salary requirements. Working with any kind of support, RMC or DSPs that support you on that is just probably instead of trying to get them to do things within your timeline, understand what they're trying to communicate on a realistic timeline so you can set up expectations across internally to that and not end up in a position where you're being chased by your businesses saying, well, you said this person was going to be on board next week. That's not happening. And then, you add on the pressure to RMCs or DSPs, but there's nothing they can do at that point. I mean, we can change a lot. We cannot control government bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think, immigration's a big one. And with the housing as well, you have to understand the sensitivities of the landlords. That's probably where your cultural understanding comes in more than anything else. If you are finding corporate leases or your employees are trying to find housing, there will be some local culture that'll seep into that process. The landlords will have some traditional values. I think that is something that we have to be respectful of.
Yes.
It is something that, you have to understand. And certain landlords will prefer to only write leases with corporates. Some don't want corporates, etc.
Yeah.
These, again, things we don't control. They are controlled by local markets and whatever's prevalent there is not something we can change.
Yeah, so I'm definitely hearing some expectations management being, super, super critical just in terms of like expect delays, expect some challenges. Don't think it's, you're swanning in from the west necessarily and it's going to be,
Absolutely. And I also think it's very helpful if people who are actually in charge of these processes, they're not physically based here, for them to actually come and spend some time and understand firsthand, not necessarily because of the RMCs or DSPs, but also to support their own internal team.
Yeah, and get sort of their experience. And I think that's definitely a theme coming up through the last few pods, as well as getting back to business travel, going, if you can spend time on either short-term assignments, but even extended business trips, it's a great way to sort of understand a little bit and meet people where they are on the ground rather than from thousands of miles away. Let's go to the here and now then in APAC. What are some of the big trends you're seeing in the region right now from a mobility standpoint?
We're definitely seeing some traction again in terms of just movements within the region. It is picking up. We're not talking about pre-COVID levels, but it is recovering. The recovery pace of each location is different. But Hong Kong and China being some of the last ones to open up, we are seeing numbers come back up slowly. I think we could definitely see that there is a bigger interest in a lot of moves back into Hong Kong, a lot of the ones that left. From a personal perspective, it's now for corporates to decide if they're going to move roles and functions back. That's obviously where there is challenges both in terms of money, but also I think still a lot of companies, special foreign companies, are a bit more on an observance level in terms of the political situation as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some hesitation there, but there's definitely more of a, from an employee level push that people that may have relocated out of Hong Kong within the region would like to come back into Hong Kong.
Oh, really interesting. Really interesting. Let's go there then. What do you think's driving that?
I think because, I mean, obviously there might be a level of bias here, considering I live here and I love it.
Yeah.
I think Hong Kong has just shown again how resilient it is after being through, almost 3 years of lockdown and having a year of protests before that. Inside Hong Kong, in terms of our lifestyle, our everyday life, it feels like it didn't happen. Things are recovering. We can see the aftermath by, unfortunately, when you walk around the city, you see a lot of places are closed down, which happened mainly during COVID. A lot of people, industries have to recover. That recovery is slow and it's going to take a long time for them to recover. So you can see the signs of that. But as a people or as the citizens here, we are sort of back to normal. It's like things didn't happen. We are back out. Hong Kong is an incredibly easy city to live in. It's a very, if you expect, there's a lot of benefits and privileges that we have. And it's just, a very lively city, I think, compared to a lot of other cities. And it's incredibly safe. And people who have lived here, I think they miss that. They miss the hustle and bustle and the noise of Hong Kong, the safety aspect. Like having all of those things in one location is quite unique. And Hong Kong is also beautiful for, from a geographic point of view. So
yes, exactly. There's so much going on. A combo of nature plus city right there.
Yeah,
just remarkable. So I'm hearing individuals, people that have lived there, wanting to go back. Let's actually look at the company level for a second. Obviously, APAC still seen as a big growth driver for lots of organizations. Where are you seeing companies move people to? Obviously, Hong Kong's still big, but like which other markets are you seeing sort of coming up?
Yeah, so we still, interestingly enough, I mean, I obviously don't have the latest RMC or DSP visibility anymore, sadly. But within our own company, we do see our bigger moves, or the biggest volume of moves tend to be into Hong Kong, in and around China, and then Singapore. That can be, explained by our business presence there as well as our population. But from a destination point of view, obviously we have started moving more out to emerging markets, just because we are either setting up representation of some of our business, or some of our business that exists. So I think now you're going to see again a bit more traction towards your Vietnams, your Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia as well to some extent.
Yes, definitely, and that's definitely what we're seeing on the inside, particularly Thailand. Coming up very strong. Lots of folks opening up there, and definitely quite a lot of moves out of Singapore if organizations haven't quite got their that sort of immigration balances right there, moving folks out of Singapore to often to Malaysia actually. So has been quite an interesting one. Then let's actually go industries within Hong Kong then. So you moved over in the peak of the sort of I guess financial bubble, and then that probably crashed quite quickly. How have you seen like the sort of industry trends of folks moving to Hong Kong? Is it still very finance driven? What are you seeing on the ground in your own personal view?
Yeah, so I think definitely when I moved here around 2008, it was vast majority was financial. It was very heavily financial focused. Post the crash and everything else, that kind of started to tip away. But and now I would probably say there's more of an equal playing field. Like you will still see your financial people moving in, see a bit more trend of more senior people coming back in, which is always a good sign, because that usually means that there'll be a, flow of other people. But I think equally you see, you have your pharmaceuticals, you have your oil people coming in, you have some motor people coming in. So I think you're kind of seeing a bigger variety, your tech people as well, bigger variety of industries being represented in there.
Yes, so widening that, and definitely something we see is people wanting to put sort of boots on the ground in APAC and really establish local presence there. It's just so hard to get things done if you're not there, as you mentioned. So that's super easy, interesting, and it was interesting. It felt like from our perspective, Singapore and Hong Kong, both major expat markets in APAC, both had quite stringent lockdowns, which really impacted that. And it was interesting. It felt for a while that maybe a third market would bubble up as sort of but it doesn't really feel like it's. And now everybody's piling back to Hong Kong and Singapore, as you mentioned, which is nuts. It's sort of how it feels like it's really coming back quickly now.
Yeah. I mean, I still think there is probably opportunities for the markets to come a bit more up, but it's just that they are still up and coming, and they're just some of those infrastructure and some of those security factors, they're not there yet.
Yeah.
Which Hong Kong and Singapore's got down to it. It's people are sort of literally paying the cost for those additional parts in Hong Kong and Singapore. But there will be, it could be a generational thing. The younger workforce will be more open to taking slightly more risks and going to more tropical and, nicer places like Thailand.
Not too bad, but
Exactly.
but it is true. I think it's the takeaway is actually, if you're regionally looking to relocate people in an industry where you think you might have to attract talent, then actually the destination is huge, and but Hong Kong in particular does have such good infrastructure for relocated folk that it's like it actually does make it a bit easier from just a talent attraction point of view.
Well, exactly. And I mean, Hong Kong will always have the advantage of remaining a financial hub due to its ties to China and having access to a market where you can't get access to anywhere else. So that's definitely a strength that Hong Kong will continue to have.
Yeah, unique privileges. I said we go off script, so gonna go off here. So you did sort of 15-ish years at some of the world's biggest RMCs.
Yeah.
And you just switched into a in-house role. I think you're sub 1 year in. Tell people what that's been like. What's it been like, sort of changing sides after so many years?
So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
I think, when you are on the RMC side, you do many times sit there and kind of try and imagine what your counterparts' life look like professionally. And I think some of those things were very true, but I think I've definitely learned a lot about the insight. I've gotten a lot more insight into the politics of working internally, the positioning that global mobility has within the larger strategic framework of a corporation. Whereas obviously the life of an RMC is global mobility and assignments and all that. In a corporate, we are, means to an end. So it's very much of a functional department, and getting, a seat at the table for strategic discussions is definitely something you need to earn. And it can take quite a while before companies to see the benefits of you being part of the strategy rather than a functional department. It's all obviously also been from a professional and skill set development. It's been great because you have to touch so many other aspects of both the HR function, but also just generally business functions to be able to do your job. So definitely a learning curve.
Such a learning curve. It's not so what I'm hearing there is it's a lot of time spent almost like fighting the corner of mobility, whereas in RMCs that's sort of a done deal. It's literally the whole company is built around this, whereas you're one part of the cog internally.
Exactly. But I mean, there is still that obviously human elements where you are very sort of intimate with your employees and with your discussions with the employees. And that was one of the aspects I always enjoyed of the industry. So I'm glad to still have that.
Yes, yeah. So you have that connection of the folks that are relocating, and is a big part of
Exactly.
their lives. You mentioned sort of the breadth and touching some of the other aspects of HR in the role. Which teams have you found yourself, or which aspects of HR have you found to be sort of most relevant, or most maybe surprised that you sort of been like, oh, wasn't necessarily expecting to deal with
Yeah.
X, Y, Z?
Well, it's I think the HRBP team is a lot
Mm,
more a team that I feel we are partnering with in
yeah,
the holistic care of our employees.
yeah,
Just because obviously what they do is very relevant to them. So I think we
yeah,
partner a lot closely with them in making sure the employee experience stays at the level we want it to, and
yeah,
to give them that an all-rounded support on an individual level. On a practical level, I spend a lot of time working with our salaries and our rewards teams,
yeah,
which was, I wasn't expecting that level of involvement on that
yeah,
side. I was thinking, hoping it would just be spreadsheets and I would just pass them on. But
yeah.
I've had to learn a lot, understand a lot, and be able to manipulate the data a lot independently to share it with
Interesting.
the employees. So that was, that was not something I'd necessarily expected that much.
Yeah.
And then obviously the HR service delivery team, from just an execution perspective, you work with them very closely.
Nice. Yeah, nice. So actually, you sort of you're in the weeds with lots of questions around compensation,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
rather than just sort of passing it over, it's like, no, but we want to ask questions.
Yeah.
So, super interesting, and it is, and that I think this is with my RMC hat on. That is all stuff that you don't necessarily appreciate how much time is being spent on, that back and forth internally, those meetings
Absolutely.
internally, how much of your time is almost spent on not necessarily move related activities, or it's kind of like, it's like stuff within rather than the actual like net
Yeah,
net net net
absolutely.
movement. So very, very, very interesting interesting insights. And yeah, pros and cons as with everything.
Yeah.
So first role at Crown was ended up being running DSP services locally, is that right?
Yeah, so that was my first role, but by the time I left Tran, I'd sort of moved into global account manager and sort of interimly leading the ICT department as well. So it
Okay.
was a bit, yeah,
Nice, nice. So you just took on multiple things.
yeah,
And obviously Crown have historically directly delivered DSP services, and
yeah,
I know it's been a bit of a mix between Carter Server and BGRS.
yeah.
Um, I know what's your sort of. I think people always sometimes like, what's the main differences between DSPs and RMCs, and should we
Mm.
use DSPs? Should we use RMCs? Is there any real difference between them? How do you think about like the difference between DSPs and RMCs first and foremost?
Um, I mean, I think it's probably more like, a specialized function or specialized profession to be in the DSP world.
Yeah,
You're focused, everything end to end, and that's kind of your main focus. The RMC world, you are more of a management supervisor role. You have these multiple functions under you, and DSP will just be one of many. And you're basically monitoring their service delivery, you're doing quality control, you're doing service delivery control, you're doing contract monitoring, etc. So you're basically on a more supervisory function on multiple services under that. So your point of view becomes more holistic, your execution becomes more focused on quality
yeah,
um, versus quantity. And you have more involvement on a supply chain level because you have to hold your providers accountable. So it's more transactional, your
yeah,
relationship. Whereas with DSP, it's more personable, and it's, a lot more accountability because you're responsible for everything. Whereas the RMC does have another layer of responsibility where they can say, well, it wasn't us, it was this provider. Now we're taking them off the panel. We'll get you another one. So it
yeah.
gives more flexibility around how you manage your relationship, both with the clients and your
Mm.
providers as well.
Yeah, it sort of gives that arm's length of hey, we weren't actually doing the DSP, we weren't actually doing the ICT, we weren't doing the corporate housing. Oh, yeah, that sort of,
Exactly.
yeah, really interesting. And I think it can blend. But what I love what you said there is like the actual end value to the relocator is for the DSP, they're actually adding a lot of value to the person relocating, right? They're like providing the
Yeah.
expertise and the specialty there. As the RMC more sitting as like master of ceremonies above the various providers and suppliers.
Exactly. I mean, our core value or their core value will be more to the client, whereas the DSP's core value will be more to the employee.
Yeah, very nicely, very nicely put. And as you're sort of building out your, as you're building out the sort of mobility function at JSSHK, how are you thinking? You know, people always in the situation seemingly are: should we go with a RMC to fully outsourcing? Should we try and manage vendors individually ourselves? How do you think of the pros and cons of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously been one of the bigger questions that I've been, thinking about at the moment as we are creating our panel. I think I have probably leaned more towards going for direct DSP services.
Yeah.
Just because we do have manageable volumes, we are not a high volume relocator, and because the instigator for starting or creating global mobility team for the company was the employee experience. So we don't want to get too far away from that in order to create, processes and efficiencies, forget the employees. So we want to start from that, where we make sure that whoever we have on board to help us has the right focus, has the right priorities, and the employees feel the effect of these changes instantly and create that. And then, then as time goes by, we can see if that grows and develops. But I think the right model for us at this point is direct relationships.
I love that. I love that. So a couple of such tasty nuggets in there in terms of one size of program. You're probably not going to be overwhelmed with thousands of vendor relationships and thousands of relocations. So it's like you can be that little bit closer. And to the purpose of the program, which is amazing that you have so much clarity on, we want to improve employee experience. The sort of play the other side of that. Potentially that can be ever so slightly higher fees going direct versus that probably it all comes out in the wash, really. So I love that. Yeah, it's removing a layer of fees in some ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are in a lucky position that for us, the cost factor is not a huge concern at this point.
Yeah.
Because of the controlled volumes and because of the types of moves we have.
Yeah.
So at this point, it doesn't need to be a deciding factor in how to set up the department.
Yeah.
Again, could change later, but for now, I'll take full advantage of that. That's not a
100%. I could just sort of hear mobility leaders being like, "Oh, I'm so jealous of Bushra." But whilst the goes good, make hay. And out of interest, then, is your program typically you are comfortable making payments on behalf? Because that's often something we see leaders struggle with. Is okay, services is fine, but actually making payments becomes a bit more of a challenge sometimes, depending on your vendors. And how do you think about that?
Yeah, so for us, that's a bit more difficult to answer because the way we relocate our people, they normally go into other one of our companies.
Nice.
And our companies are, as you know, so different and independent in their own nature. So as much as we control the mobile workforce that goes in and out of those companies to some extent, we have some limitations to how we can dictate their internal processes. So we are not going to go and tell Cathay how to do certain things or Coca-Cola or Swire shipping. So so those things can vary depending on where our staff's going and which company.
Yes. So you have the sort of the internal politics of the crazy different sort of operating companies that you have on helping people move to, which is so understandable and sounds challenging and probably a podcast for another day. As you know, Bushra, we have a tradition on the podcast of the previous guest leaving a question for the next guest. And today you've got a very forward-looking tech style question of how do you think AI will impact your GM function over the next 5 years? And what should we be doing to prepare for it? What are you doing to prepare for it?
Well, that is an interesting one.
Yeah, that's one for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, starting with the last two questions, at the moment, we haven't adopted AI in any of our processes on the GM space. It is something that's in our bigger IT digital strategy
Okay, nice.
for other core functions, and could very well trickle down to GM if and when we want to use that.
Yeah.
As in how that would impact that, I'm not too sure. I mean, at the moment, I think initially it would again be more akin to a, bot function where we would have that as a sort of one location call center type situation where hopefully we could use that for everyday communications, everyday questions and answers, etc. Because our setup is so complex, I can't see a streamline where we can adopt it and use that as an overall kind of underpinning support for our program, because there's just so many variations in terms of how we move. But if we take that out of the equation, I can definitely see the potential of even running briefing calls with AI, running, needs assessments through AI. A lot of the kind of things that we are doing verbally or that is being done on phone calls or etc. Can be put into an AI function. And from there probably developed into something bigger. But one thing I've always said is global mobility is a human industry. And there's been a lot of digitalization in the RMCs as well over the past 5 years and in all functions. And some of that is very good, but some of that has taken away the human element. And consistently, every time that we've pushed that digital agenda, we've started seeing lots of clients, a heightening of complaints, because you cannot predict the emotional sense of a relocating family. It is extremely intense, and I don't think any amount of digitalization of communication can ever cover for that human element. It's fine if you have a young person going a 6-month assignment from Hong Kong to Singapore. They like their phones, they like their apps, and it's one person. The second you throw in any variables like families, like multiple travels, etc., there's a human element. So you want to try and get someone to settle into a small suburb of Jakarta. It's not the easiest place of falling in. And giving them a good, recommended real estate person is not going to. I think the success with any relocation company lies in the human factor, and I think that needs to always be kept in the center and middle.
Yeah, and I love this answer for sort of nicely encapsulating something we're super passionate about. Is it's so much of relocations are messy, nuanced, first time things that actually maybe AI isn't perfect for, because a lot of it is human emotion, random, sort of like not necessarily been done before. And certainly whenever we at PerchPeek have looked at the average relocator sends about 400 messages, often for things just because they're stressed or they've got small things, as you mentioned. So that human support is so critical, and you just can't get high employee experience scores without it. And you do just open up, from an RMC perspective, the burden is just going to go back to the company's HR, which is not going to be good. Then it's kind of like, what that doesn't really work. But then I do love your response on some of the more standardized pieces, actually, which briefing call is a good example of. There's just talking through benefits, etc. Perfect use case for sort of thinking about, okay, actually that more like standardized day-to-day work, can we focus more on the human element? But actually quite good for our industry, that there is such a rough emotional expectations management aspect to it, which I think is, is an opportunity to stay relevant over the coming years as well. For sure, I love this. We've covered such a wide variety of topics, from the sort of evolving mobility landscape in APAC to clearly how much of a fan you are of Hong Kong, which is great. It's making me want to book a plane ticket today, due to the sort of differences in DSPs and RMCs. So you've been truly amazing. Thank you for coming on and dropping knowledge with me for so much. Anytime. Speak to you soon.
Take care.
Okay. Great. I don't know why it's still saying recording, but anyway. Just my laptop today. I pressed stop, so anyway, we'll just edit this out anyway. That was great. Thank you so much for your
thank you.
And thanks for rolling with all my random specific questions. But people just tend to find it most valuable.
Oh yeah, no, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when people just
a lot more natural.
Yeah, and the people are just always. I think people are always like, just like interested in the specifics, because as you know, so many people. Most of our clients are, or people that listen are, like 1 or 2 person mobility teams, and often are like sort of suffering in silence, so to speak. So it's exactly. So so really, really good. Next steps. We'll send this off to the audio editor. To get it recorded. To get it edited. We'll probably look to release this next Wednesday. I think I'll just check on with marketing. So we'll probably get you the Monday or Tuesday next week, the edited version. I'm going to ask you for a short bio and just an image. Happy to use your LinkedIn image, but I'll just put it in an email, and you'll see a woman called Mish is she like drives the like editing and sort of creation, more like the creative side of things. Not really my bag. So you see her name floating around. Then did you have a think about potential question for the next guest on your side?
Yeah, I did think so. I think it'll be interesting to see whoever that is. If they think with the sort of continued globalization and need and want for inter-company collaboration, do they think that there is a space for the revival of traditional assignment types?
Interesting. I love that. Revival of traditional assignment types. Really interesting. What are your thoughts on that, out of interest?
I think that there is a space. I think there's already a space there. It's very small. And it's kind of people feel like they have to apologize for it when they use those assignment types. But I think that it's becoming increasingly more obvious that there is a need to, if not take it all the way back, to take it closer to that, because we do see a lot of companies, including our own, that are sending people on these longer term projects. And we are trying to be very creative with the type of assignments that they go on to, but all it's doing is basically creating an extra layer of stress and frustration, because then halfway through, now you have to come back for 3 months because you're doing this. And now we have to extend your visa because we didn't create that. Now you have to go and find a different housing because we only negotiated for 8 months.
Yeah.
Like you're creating so many you're expecting it to stop at a certain time and it never is. And then you're creating all these additional layers of stress because then in the middle of focusing on these cool projects, you have to kind of do a mini arrival again into the location and start negotiating things that you didn't expect. And it's just constantly at the back of your mind because there's no stability. If you know you're there for at least 2 years, there's stability, you sign up for it. It's a lot of things that work. Everything from your phone contract to your lease to your cable contract, like all those, you don't have to start finding creative ways to get around their minimum terms and stuff.
Oh my God.
So I think that there is definitely, and I think it's already there in a much smaller thing, but it just still seems like it's a swear word, so people don't really want to use it for long-term assignments. But I think that there definitely needs to be some type of revival of traditional assignment types. I mean, you can look at the compensation factors, but in terms of timeline and the core, the core aspects of being there and the practicalities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think what we see is a lot of organizations try often to then in this world where they're like, hey, they don't want to do STAs and have people be like, oh, guess what? It stretched from 6 months to 12 months. Oh, actually, there's still work to do because it took longer. So they try and just move people over on permanent transfers, even if it's maybe only for a year or two. They'll just like go into local contract, move back, and that can work really well in lots of cases, is what we see, but can be more challenging in more emerging markets where people don't necessarily want to go on to a local contract. If you're based in Switzerland or the US or whatever, you don't necessarily want to go on to a local contract.
You're going to have a talent issue there, right? You're not going to have high talent wanting to commit to moving to Indonesia permanently, right?
Yes, so, exactly.
I mean, if you want to say you go 2 years on a near to local package, that's different, right? Like, but you've got to give them an out, basically.
You've got to give them an out and a right of return or something. And so because the one thing I definitely agree is these sorts of short-term assignments, extended business travel seems great because people don't necessarily commit to as much cost up front, but it just keeps like we've had so many clients this year come to us for like tax services being like, oh, this person's just been doing extended business travel to the US, but they've gone 2 weeks a month, and now that and it's just like then you're unpicking stuff down the line, and it's like stressful for them, and you're just a bit like, well, had you just committed up front to a more permanent piece? And I think particularly now that knock on wood, COVID is a bit of a dusty part of history. Hopefully, there's that space for it.
Exactly.
So let's see. No, that's a great question. I'd be interested to see because we just see such a variety of views on that, but people end up spending the money anyway. But I want to ask you. You mentioned during the speed networking that you just implemented some tech. I was curious, who did you go with in the
end? Sorry, we implemented some what?
An assignment management system. Did you say?
Oh yeah. We went with Equus.
Okay, nice. And presumably you'd had used Equus a little bit in your time, but like only in terms of what had been built on top of.
Yeah, so I used Assignment Pro almost in every company you want to put.
They call it the market.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I used one or two in between, but we did the RFP process, and for a system that's also functionable for our in-house GMT versus being a RMC, that was definitely, came on top. And it's been in the market, it's tried and tested. And, we needed the stability at least that comes with that.
Yes, exactly. And like you just know for your first point of call for a like assignment heavy population, it has amazing functionality for that. So that's interesting. Always curious to hear what people are, when you go through RFPs for it. What people are seeing in the market. Cool. Well, this has been great. Thank you for putting up with my technical woes at the start. I don't know what's going on there.
We all have them.
Great chat in the last couple of weeks. I'll drop you an email later today. But enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening, and I'll be in touch later with details of next steps for the pod.
Great. Take care.
Awesome. Cheers, Bushra. Bye-bye.
Bye.